Hello, car salespersons of all makes, models, and brands. My name is Chance, and welcome to the Leasing versus Financing episode of the Sales Bible. In this particular video, we're actually going to be focusing more so on the customer end of this, just because I've seen a lot of people go in depth on the financial end of things, and I will do that in a later video, but I think it's firstly most important to address what kind of customers typically lease. Before we get into that, however, let me give you a brief description on financing, leasing, and just go over the differences between them. So, leasing is essentially paying the depreciation of the vehicle for a duration of time. Customers are under several restrictions, including kilometers and modifications. At the end of the term, the customer can return the vehicle, buy the vehicle in full, finance the residual, or trade the vehicle in and get something else. Financing, on the other hand, is paying the full amount of the vehicle for a duration of time. The customer accepts full responsibility. At the end of the term, the vehicle belongs to the customer. So, needless to say, financing is far simpler than leasing, but as we'll get into in a little bit here, leasing has far more benefits for the vast majority of people. Now let's take a look at a quick chart comparing the kind of people who finance versus the kind of people who lease. So typically people who finance have a desire for mental ownership. It's something they need to have to be able to be comfortable in the vehicle. Either that or they like performance modifications. It's very rare to get into a lease where you can modify the vehicle performance-wise. Cosmetic things are usually okay, but if you're retuning the engine or installing a turbo or whatever, typically you cannot do that in a lease. Your individual make may vary, but as a rule of thumb, it's kind of the thing I've been noticing. Financing is also really good for people who already have negative equity. It's a little bit trickier to build negative equity into a lease. In most cases, it's impossible. Financing is also ideal for people who drive a lot, who have higher mileage. Typically above that 30,000 kilometers a year is typically where financing is your best bet. And if you're using it for commercial uses like Uber, Lyft, or skip the dishes, anything like that, just because you're going to be miling out your vehicle quite a bit, so it's better to just have that security of being able to finance it. Also, a lot of lenders don't like approving leases for those things, so just bear that in mind. Leasing is really good, on the other hand, for people who are unsure of their future. They don't know if they're going to have kids in the next 5 years, stuff like that, because benefit of the lease is you can kind of get out of it whenever because you're just paying the depreciation. There is a small penalty associated for leaving the lease, but it's relatively inconsequential. If you're using it for a business as well, this does differ a little bit from just general commercial use. So when you use a lease as a business, you can actually write off your payments in terms of depreciation. Very cool stuff. If you're tech-minded and you like having the coolest features, leasing's the best way to appease those customers. If you want low maintenance costs, leasing is the way to go. Typically with leasing, you also get smaller payments, at least relative to the overall term. If the customer's accident prone, you're going to want to put them in the lease. A lot of makes have a policy built in where if you get into an accident in a leased vehicle, so long as you repair it at a certified repair shop, it doesn't actually affect the residual value or the equity in the lease. So it's very cool stuff. And if they don't drive a lot of kilometers, leasing is 99.9% of the time the way you're going to want to put them into a vehicle. Now that we've addressed the standard personality traits of a person who finances versus a person who leases, let's take a look at a more holistic dealership approach. How does each benefit the dealership? So when you have a customer who's leasing, they become repeat customers. Reason being is when their lease comes to an end, they're gonna have to do something with that vehicle, and it will most likely result in a sale for you, and you'll usually get a notification from your CRM or from your make as to when that's happening, so it's your job to just jump on that. It's a pretty easy phone call. It's also great for pre-owned inventory. Pre-owned buyers love buying leased vehicles. They're typically in great condition, they've been maintained very well, and they typically have very low kilometers as well. So it's just all good indicators for a pre-owned vehicle. It also reduces the amount of negative equity they have when they trade into something new. So I've never personally seen a case where a person has more than a couple $100s of neg coming out of a lease. It is hypothetically possible, so just bear that in mind, but for the most part, it's few and far between. Now, in terms of financing, the only real benefit I could think of for the dealership was it's a source of revenue for the service department. Typically, as vehicles get older on in age and higher up in kilometers, they break more often. It's not really a secret. So that's really the only advantage I can think of for financing, at least as it relates to the dealership. That being said, if you can think of any ideas on why financing is better than leasing or vice versa, or you can think of any benefits for the dealership, please let me know in the comments down beneath. I really do appreciate it. And I mean, which would you prefer? What direction do you typically lean? What do you think is the best choice? Let me know down beneath. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it. And as always, happy selling, everyone.